Well, hello YouTube. It has been almost a year since I have put out a video, and I'm having a boring night at work, so I figured why not knock one out now. One of the things I've wanted to talk about for quite a while, and one of the things I think would make an interesting video, is talking about my top 5 apprehensions that we had as hospital security. Now, when I talk about apprehension, that is the nomenclature or the name that our company gave to basically doing a citizen's arrest on somebody. In the state that I work in, there is no statute authority for security outside of common law. So common law practice is you can you can detain somebody, for a felony or a misdemeanor breach of the peace that occurs in your presence. But the thing about it is, it has to occur in your presence. So if you go up to a floor and for a combative patient, let's say, and the nurse just said, hey, this guy punched me when I went in to give care, and then I stepped out of the room and he's still in there. Well, I can't go in there and just slap handcuffs on him and say, all right, you're being detained for battery, because I didn't witness it. And it was just one of those sticky situations where, in that situation, obviously, yes, we're still going to assist in getting them, calling law enforcement. We do our own report about that and things like that, but I can't just walk in and slap cuffs on something I didn't witness. Now, if we get up there and the guy is actively punching the nurse right in front of us, that's a different scenario, because now we're witnessing it. So some of those situations can be very, very fine line where you really got to use your best judgment about things and not get too heavy on trying to handcuff everybody and things like that. And that's something I had to learn the hard way. I will tell you right now, I'm the first to admit I was very, very overactive sometimes, and thankfully everything worked out. So don't make the same mistakes I did. Now, just to kind of set the ground for you a little bit, the hospital that I worked at was an inner city hospital. So it was basically built into the foundation of the city. It was in our state's largest city, and it's basically, you step out the front of the building and you're on the, once you get off the property, you're on the public sidewalk, there's bus stops, you're just part of the city. So that differentiates it a little bit between a hospital that's, let's say, in a suburb, or a hospital that is, there's not as much stuff around it, because it affects a lot of the stuff that you deal with. And it being in a city, it means that it's generally way more active and a lot more things happen a lot quicker than they do in some of the other facilities. It also means that you don't have a quick police response, and that is one of the big keys here to some of the stories I am going to tell. Is if we called law enforcement in, it's big city law enforcement, it would probably take them 45 minutes to an hour to show up. Not that they were far away, but they have a lot more other priority calls to go to most of the time. Now, obviously, if there was something really, really serious going on, they would get there, but it would still a lot of times take time depending on how busy that they were. One other thing to consider here is that we did not have law enforcement on site. Where I work now, we have a law enforcement officer that is part of our campus. He or she is here all the time. They have a car assigned here all the time, and that makes a big difference as far as how you approach things, how you deal with things, and stuff like that. It makes a huge difference, as opposed to not having law enforcement on site, where you are the one that has to be the one to deal with the situation and has to make the decisions and has to carry things through. You can't just be like, all right, well, the cops will be here in 2 minutes, we'll just let them deal with it. It wasn't like that. We had to deal with basically everything and hope that we were right, and had to deal with the repercussions if we weren't right. So it was fantastic training, fantastic. And anyone who was looking into going into law enforcement, I'm telling you, if you can find a situation like that where you can work in a hospital, a big hospital, or a inner city hospital where there is not law enforcement on site, you will develop a huge amount of knowledge and a huge just toolbox of ways to talk to people and ways to get people to do what you need them to do without actually telling them to do it. And it's fantastic training. It really is. So the only thing about that is only do it for a couple of years. Don't get burned out doing hospital security, because you won't want to be a cop then. In most of these scenarios and most of the time that I worked at this hospital, I had about 3 or 4 officers working when we probably should have had around 8. So that also makes a difference. We were very understaffed at that time, which just makes it that much more dangerous for everybody. So jumping into the first story here, this actually started with a stalking. So we had a housekeeper that worked third shift that was having problems with her ex-boyfriend. He was stalking her, showing up at her house, filming her, doing all sorts of stuff that stalkers do. And we found out that he would come into work and he would follow her around and harass her, or he would try and find where she was working in the building. Now, this was third shift, so the building was locked up. He couldn't just get in. However, what he could do is come in on second shift when the doors were still open, find a bathroom or someplace to hide out, and then go find her when she started her shift at 11, which is exactly what he did this night. Now, we were made aware of this, and all of her coworkers were made aware of this, that if you see this guy, to let us know right away. Someone did that night on second shift. They saw him wandering around. They let us know, and second shift searched the entire building. They couldn't find him. And there is 1,000,001 places to hide in a large hospital. There's so many places to hide. And he was obviously still there because on third shift, we got a call from housekeeping supervisor that one of the housekeeping employees had seen this guy wandering around in the hallway. So the dispatcher that night was my sergeant, and he told the housekeeping supervisor, hey, take the housekeeper, the victim in this, and have her lock herself in a bathroom and just wait there until we come and get her. I go start looking for this guy. I come around a corner, and all of a sudden I see the guy standing basically right in front of me. He's in front of a couple of elevators, waiting to get on the elevator. Fortunately, my partner and one of my best friends at the time too, who was working with me, came around the corner a different corner at the exact same time, saw him, and we saw him go in the elevator. Now, the elevator he was getting onto went up to patient care units. So we couldn't let him get up there, and the elevator was not secured once you were inside the building, so you didn't need card access or anything to get up there. Couldn't let him get up there, so he was trying to push the button, close the elevator door on us. We put our arm in the door, said, hey, step out, step out. He was refusing. Finally, we reached in to try and pull him out, and the fight was on. The elevator door wound up closing while we were fighting with him in the elevator, so now we were trapped in the elevator with him. He punched my partner. He tried to take my partner's baton. I was trying to get on the radio to call it out. My radio got bumped to the wrong channel, so they had no idea where we were. And we get out on the third floor, which was a patient care unit, and he tried to run. So we grabbed him. We wound up throwing him into this counter. There was like a bar height counter that was right in front of the nurse's station, which was right in front of the elevators. Threw him into that. That at least got him on the ground, and we were fighting with him on the ground. He wasn't giving up his hands. He was putting his hands underneath him. We didn't know if he had a weapon he was trying to grab. I wound up pepper spraying him 2 different times. Finally, my partner was able to get on the radio, call out where we were, and the other 2 officers showed up, and we were able to successfully get the guy in handcuffs and get him off the unit. Extremely dangerous guy. We CCAP'd him. He's got a rap sheet as long as your arm for very similar crimes, and just a very, very dangerous guy. It was not the kind of person we wanted in our facility, and I'm glad it got taken care of. Second one was actually for a stolen vehicle. So we had a bunch of vehicle entry to autos that started popping up where it's basically just people walking by, grabbing the door handle. If the door handle of the car is unlocked, they reach in, just grab whatever change, phone chargers, whatever they can to get, and they just take off. Started happening a lot, and when we started reviewing camera footage, we realized that a lot of these were being done by the same guy, or at least a guy that looked very similar. So we had an incident where a vehicle was actually stolen. Now he had escalated to that. There was a building on campus that was attached to the parking structure that was all outpatient clinics, so it was closed at night except for the housekeepers that were over there cleaning and working. Well, there was a door on the first floor that a lot of times would be propped open. Housekeeping would prop it open so that they could take trash in and out of there, even though we told them not to. And he came in through that door, went into their office that was right there. All their personal stuff was laying on the desk in the office, their wallets, keys, everything. He grabbed a set of keys and a wallet from this guy, one of the housekeepers, and proceeded to go out in the structure and try and find his car. After reviewing the camera footage for this the next day, the guy was wandering around for almost 45 minutes clicking this button, or clicking the remote, trying to find the vehicle. He eventually did. He got in the car and he took off with it. And fortunately, where he did get in the car, there was a camera right there, so we got a real good shot of his face. The next day, seems as though this was starting to become a persistent problem, I went out. This was on second shift, so it was about 9 o'clock at night. Went out and started just doing a foot patrol in the parking structure, just walking around. You can see a lot more when you're on foot than you can when you're in a vehicle. I get up to about the third floor, and guess who wanders out from an elevator lobby right in front of me? This guy. And he was with another guy, and they looked at me like a deer in the headlights. But they kept walking, and so did I, because I was by myself and I didn't want to let them, or I didn't want to try and approach him at that point because I was by myself and I knew it would take everybody else a while to get there, and there was 2-on-1. So I just started kind of just watching, seeing where they were walking to. They started walking towards the elevator lobby that led into the hospital. So at that point, I just went up and walked up to him. I was like, hey guys, you need help finding something? You know, where are you trying to get to? Blah, 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 blah. Just trying to engage him in conversation to get everybody else a chance to get there. Called my sergeant over. I said, hey, just bring the picture of the guy. Before I approached him the second time, I said, hey, just bring the picture of the guy down to the main elevator lobby. So she shows up down there with the picture just because I wanted a second opinion on it. Goes, yep, that's him. So put him against the wall. We handcuffed him. There was no issue with that. The other guy was surprisingly cooperative. The other gentleman that he was with had the keys in his pocket of the car that they had stolen the previous night. And that car was parked about 2 blocks away. So not only did we get the guy for stealing the car, we recovered the stolen vehicle from the previous night and all the guy's property that had been taken. So that was a good one. That was a win right there. Next one was for a trespassing. Now, criminal trespass was something that was very, very common for us to deal with. We dealt with that more than we dealt with issues with patients and visitors and all the other stuff that you deal with in a hospital. We dealt with criminal trespass more than any of that. And part of the reason for that was because our building was not really set up with security in mind, honestly. You could pretty much, if it was during the day and everything was open, you could pretty much wander in and out of there at any time for any reason. No one was really screening people. So this guy would do the same thing as our first guy did. He would come in before the doors locked at night. He would hide out in a bathroom or something like that. And then once everything was locked up and it was later at night, he'd wander around the hospital and started stealing things. And we knew we had somebody because just like with the vehicles, we started getting a lot of thefts. And it was not just like minor stuff. It was like nurses were reporting that their whole purse was stolen, or they were reporting that their wallet was stolen, or stuff had been rummaged through and like their waiting areas, or I'm sorry, not their waiting areas, their conference rooms and their areas where they kept all their personal stuff when they were working. And so we didn't know who was doing it, but there was a gentleman, a younger guy, that we had kicked out a few times during the night. We found him in waiting areas and he had no hospital business. And we kind of started suspecting that it might be him, because in order for somebody to steal all of this stuff and wander through all these units unnoticed, you would have to be, it couldn't just be a typical homeless person. It would have to be somebody that was dressed fairly nicely and looked like they fit in. And this guy matched that to a T. He always had nicer clothing on. He had a backpack, but it was new. He didn't smell or anything like a typical homeless person, like the usual thefts we dealt with were usually from homeless people. And so we had a pretty strong suspicion that it was him. And there was a night when we almost caught him in a little back area of the hospital where there was nobody really around, and he took off. But we just saw the tail end of him running down the stairwell and then outside, and he took off by the time we were able to catch up to him. But so that point, we pretty much knew it was him. We got a call. This was again on third shift at about 6:30 in the morning. We got a call of a guy that was sleeping in one of the waiting areas. Staff had called it in and So we went up there to talk to him, and as soon as we saw him, we knew it was him. So at that point, we basically had enough of him from kicking him out previously that we could apprehend him for criminal trespass. We made the decision to do that because of not only is he trespassing, but he's also stealing, and it's persistent. He's been a persistent issue. So told him to stand up, put his hands behind his back, and as soon as we grabbed a hold of him, the fight was on. Same guy was with in the first story, actually. We were fighting with him in this waiting area. There was only 3 people working that night, so the other guy came up. We were able to get him in handcuffs. He fought with us the whole way downstairs to the little room that we would take him to, waiting for the police. Police showed up. He lied to the police about his name, and as soon as they found his correct information, he had several warrants, which is probably the reason that he fought with us. And I remember the officer was one of the regular guys who showed up a lot. He told me, he's like, if you see this guy, let us know right away, because he is up to no good. So we knew that if the police were looking for him, especially in a big city, if the police are looking for you and they know you by face and name, you're probably doing something pretty serious with the amount of people that they see in a day. You're memorable to them. So, and he actually did show up one more time a few months later, found him sleeping, same area. That time we also detained him again, and that time there was no fight, because I think he knew that we weren't going to just let him leave or just let him go if he started fighting with us. So, actually dealt with him twice. Let's see. So, next one was also a trespassing, and this one was kind of a unique story. So, one of our officers was patrolling down in the basement, and we had a little library, a medical library down in the basement that you actually had to scan a card to get into. So anybody who was in there, you would have had to have either scanned yourself in or someone would have had to let you in. It was later at night, and I say later, I say probably 9 o'clock at night or so. And the officer was walking through there, and she saw this guy sitting there, and she's like, something doesn't look right about this guy. He was dressed, he had a button-up and khakis on, and he had a bag with him, but nothing really stood out about him other than that. But she started questioning him, like, hey, do you work here? Whatever. Do you work here? Are you visiting somebody here? Et cetera, et cetera. He wouldn't give her any information, but he grabbed his bag and started leaving. So she started following him, just to make sure he got out of the building, because anytime if you remove somebody from the building that has no business, you always follow them out of the building and then ensure either by following them or via camera footage that they are off property. You don't ever just leave them and trust that they're going to leave, because they won't. And so she was following him. She took him out one of the entrances. She called it out. Me and another officer went to meet her there just to make sure that he did in fact leave. And as he was leaving, he started walking down the street, and it dead-ended into the entrance that we were at. And all of a sudden, instead of walking straight, he turned there was a little side door that entered into the parking structure. He turned and he started just bolting, just booking into that door and into the parking structure. As soon as he got in the parking structure, if you run straight, you could have just gone right out the front of the parking structure, out to the front of the building, and you would have been gone. Had he done that, we would have let him go. However, instead of that, he starts turning and running up the ramp into the parking structure. Now, at this time was a common time when we had a lot of people. It was a shift change time, so we had a lot of people walking in the parking structure to and from their vehicles and things like that. And this guy was completely nonverbal with us. We had no idea what he was doing there and what his intentions are when we're kicking you out, and all of a sudden you just turn and just beeline and start running into the parking structure. It's just not normal behavior, and we couldn't just let him go, because we don't know what his intentions are or what he might do to somebody. And if he's desperately trying to get away from us, we don't want to have a situation where somebody gets carjacked or somebody gets injured by this guy because he's trying to get away. We wound up chasing him, doing a couple of loops in the parking structure. Finally, we cornered him and we tackled him, put him in handcuffs, and it was just one of those situations where it was odd, because it's like we don't really have anything on this guy. We got a trespass, but we had never given him a previous warning. And we didn't really have, you could maybe call that disorderly conduct, but I don't really think that it's not going to hold up in a court. So it's just one of those situations where it's just odd behavior, but we had to address it, and we had to we had to deal with this guy because, again, we don't know what his intentions are. Had he told us, hey, I'm just running up to get in my car, which is what he was doing, he was just running to try and get in his car and take off, but we didn't know that. He didn't tell us that. So it's just one of those just really odd situations. Then the last one, it was on a weekend, second shift, again, only 3 of us working. Called up to one of the ICUs for a patient that was screaming. That's all we knew. So one of the other officers gets there first, and I get on the unit, and all of a sudden I hear all this yelling, like "F you this, F you that," and it wasn't the officer. It was someone else. So I round the corner, and this guy is getting in my partner's face. You know, F you, rent-a-cop, what are you doing up here? These are the guys that couldn't pass the academy, blah, 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 blah. I have no idea who this guy is or why he's yelling or why he's so upset that we're there. I had no idea. Well, it turns out that the patient that was screaming was his brother. He had been in a serious car accident, and they had put him into a medical-induced coma, and he was just coming out of it. He was freaking out because he didn't know where he was. And he wasn't with it. The patient wasn't mentally with it or anything like that. He was still coming out of this, and he was just screaming. That's what the screaming was about. Well, the brothers, there was actually 2 brothers there, and I have no idea what they thought or why they were so upset that we were there, but they were extremely upset. And the one brother, I kind of tried to call him over just to separate him. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? Why are you guys so upset? Like, I don't even know why I'm here. Like, what, you know, he starts getting in my face to the point where he's very, very close, too close for comfort. And the other brother was going after my partner. When I say going after, I mean he was doing the same thing, getting in his face. And that's one of those situations where you got to think, there's only 3 of us. They had a whole family there in the waiting area. And do we really want to go hands-on with this guy? Yeah, he's getting in my face. Yeah, I should have shoved him back. Yeah, I should have. But as soon as you do that, and I knew it, the fight was going to be on with these 2 guys. And there would have been 3 people fighting 2, and then if the rest of the family got back there, it would have went bad real quick. Fortunately, the parents were there, and they were able to calm down the 2 brothers, their sons, and get them to step away so that we could continue through and just make sure that there was nothing else going on, and they did. That was one of those that was one of the most, even though it wasn't the worst like situation I had ever been in, it was one of the most gut-wrenching situations I had, just because of how close that came to turning bad. So, and later on in the shift, one of the brothers actually saw one of the other officers who was up there, and he walked up to her and he said, hey, I apologize, you know, we just let our emotions get the best of us. We didn't mean any harm or anything like that, and we had no problems with them the rest of the time that we were there, but that was just a hair-raising situation. So I'm going on 23 minutes of ranting now. But I just want to let you guys know that if you're considering hospital security, it's not like that everywhere. There's a lot of places that it's very quiet and tame and you don't deal with a lot of that kind of stuff. But if you work in a larger medical facility, you're going to deal with a lot, and you need to be prepared for that. You need to be prepared to understand that this isn't a joke. This is real life, and your decisions can, really, really affect your future and other people's futures and just your overall safety. So if you do work hospital security, just hats off. Thank you for what you do. And it was a fantastic ride for working there. I wouldn't trade it for anything. So take care, guys. Be safe, and feel free to comment. If you guys have some stories or comments about mine, feel free. I'd love to respond to those. So thanks. Take care.